Hello, and welcome everybody to the National Trends in Disability Employment,
or nTIDE,
Lunch and Learn series.
Just a few housekeeping items before we begin.
This webinar is being recorded.
We will post an archive of each webinar each month on our website at www.researchondisability.org/nTIDE.
This site will also provide copies of the presentations, the speakers' bios, full transcripts, and other valuable resources.
As an attendee of this webinar, you are a viewer.
To ask questions of the speakers, click on the Q&A box on your webinar screen and type your questions into the box.
Speakers will review these questions and provide answers during the last section of the webinar.
Some questions may be answered directly in the Q&A box.
If you have any questions following this recording, please contact us at disability.statistics@unh.edu
or toll free at 866-538-9521 for more information.
Thanks for joining us.
Enjoy today's webinar.
Hi, everybody. This is Andrew Houghtonville from the University of New Hampshire. Happy 5th of July. I hope everybody had a nice afternoon and evening yesterday. I'm glad to see we're getting some participants starting to roll in. I was wondering if people would be available today for the webinar, and I thank everybody on the production side of the webinar for showing up on this what many people are taking as a holiday day. I also want to recognize Anna Brennan Curry. Anna's been working on the webcast behind the scenes, making everything go pretty smoothly over the years, and well, very smoothly over the years. And Anna's taking a job at St. Anselm's College, and want to recognize her work over the years and wish her good luck. So I'll do that. Good luck, Anna. So today's Lunch and Learn is, again, it's a joint effort of the University of New Hampshire, Kessler Foundation, and the Association of University Centers on Disability, AUCD. It's on the first Friday of every month, including those after the 4th of July. It's funded by NTIDE under the Employment Policy and Measurement, or RTC. Today we're going to follow the same kind of agenda. We're going to go a little more quickly through the numbers, then we're going to pass it to Denise for the news. We have a guest speaker, Norris, and we're going to also hear from Stacy DaCosta. We'll have Q&A at the end, and then we'll wrap it up around 1 o'clock. All right, John O'Neill, take it over.
Okay, thank you, everyone. Good day. Andrew, next slide.
I'm on the
month.
Yep.
Yeah, the monthly nTIDE report is what we're going to present first. The stats from that. It's a release. It's a press release and an infographic that looks at the latest employment statistics coming out of the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, which reports on the job situation, the employment situation on the first Friday of each month. Next slide, Andy. The source of the data that's in our nTIDE report is from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. It's from their current population survey. It is the official source of the unemployment rate, which so much is made of. It includes, our statistics include civilians aged 16 to 64 not living in the institutions. And this information has been available on the CPS since 2008 and onward. That was the year that the 6 disability questions were added to many of the federal surveys. Our data is not seasonally adjusted as yet, so that's why we compare to the same month last year. That's instead of comparing month to month. I think that's it. Andrew, over to you.
Okay. Thank you, John. All right. The numbers. So we actually had a very positive month this month compared to this time last year. The employment to population ratio, which is the percentage employed, went up from 29.5 to 31.4, 31%. while the employment to population ratio went up also a little bit for people without disabilities, from 74.5 to 74.9. And so this is, and we'll go to the trend in a minute, but this is good news given the last few months. The labor force participation rate, which is the percentage who are not only working, but also adds in the percentage that are actively looking for work. This also increased from 32.5 to 33.9, and a slight increase of only 0.2 of a percentage for people without disability, 77.6 to 77.9%, or 77.8%. And so when we look at the time trend, you can certainly see the seasonality. So the jaggedness that you see is a consistent seasonality if you look at the employment to population ratio for people without disabilities. And you see that seasonalness happen a little bit with the population with disabilities as well. What you can see is compared to this time last month, I've never been sure if you guys can see my cursor, but what you can see is an increase from 29.5 to 31 percentage points. And so that's a nice jump. Now, if you look at the trend line, and I'll go to the next slide, you see kind of, we had some really great times going back to, say, this downturn here in at the beginning of 2014. And then we had a slow climb, and it's been kind of leveling off since, it looks like about, mid 2018. And so we've been seeing some rather sporadic numbers, but these last few months, we've been kind of leveling off. And so we're hoping, that this is kind of a good turnaround from this time last year. And maybe this is the start of good things. It could be, a continued leveling off. The story is typically one of full employment, that as the economy goes into full employment, people with disabilities start seeing jobs posted nearby, and so some of those transportation barriers may be less important. But also employers are looking for people regardless of their background and training. And so if you're a person with a disability that's been out of the job market for a while, perhaps on Social Security disability programs, the ability to get training, on-the-job training at an employer is probably more available because of the inability for employers to find workers, so during the time of full employment. So that's kind of the story. We're writing papers and we're analyzing these data more and more, and we've actually gone back to the 1960s with some old data from the 60s, and be looking forward to presenting that at some point. So now I'm going to turn it over to Denise. Again, you can ask questions at the Q&A section at the end of the webcast. Denise, take it over.
Cool. Hey, everybody. So normally I start out with the federal policy update. And the biggest thing going on in Washington right now is they're on recess. So there's not a lot to tell you today. And in fact, there's not a lot that's changed since we talked last month. The only thing that you probably should know is that the House passed their appropriations bill. And we talked about this last month. We talked, you might remember, about an omnibus, which is all of the appropriations bills all rolled into one and passed, or what they've been calling a minibus, which is what they actually passed. A minibus was 4 or 5 of the appropriations bills, including the one where most of the issues that we care about are included. That's the Labor, Health and Human Services Education Appropriations Bill. It passed 226 to 203. Normally, you would think that means that now we move to the Senate and we continue the normal procedure. Yes, but I have to say there is not a particular expectation that the Senate will pass the House bill, and the Senate is not currently working on their appropriations bill. So, and the president has said that he will veto the bill that was just passed by the House should it show up on his desk. So yes, appropriations appears to be moving forward. But whether that means anything at this point, I frankly would tell you probably not. And frankly, we may well end up with another continuing resolution. We'll just have to wait and see. But in the meantime, take a deep breath. They're on recess. Everybody's home in the districts, and if you aren't visiting them or seeing them, you should be. Okay, next slide, Andrew. A few interesting things popped up this month that I thought you might be interested in. This one I love. The National Disability Rights Network. Everybody's been reading a lot about the census in the newspapers and about what questions will be on it, all of that stuff. But this is a very particular piece. It's like 2 pages front and back on the census that was put together by the National Disability Rights Network about why the census matters for people with disabilities. And frankly, the reason is because it controls a lot of money based on where programs will be funded based on where population is. There's lots of population-based programs. So this looks at, and the Census Bureau particularly considers people with disabilities hard to count, or a greater risk of undercount is actually how they talk about it. And people with disabilities are also overrepresented in other groups that are hard to count, like people of color, people who are homeless, people with low income. So the census is reaching out and trying to do some things better this year, or it'll start in March. This interviews are supposed to start in March of 2020. There's more Braille, large print. There's an ASL video that's available, TDD, non-English languages, all kinds of things. They're also doing for people who are what they call in group quarters, which means anyone living together in some kind of congregate setting. So it's everything from nursing home and skilled nursing care to group homes, you can imagine, all kinds of things. So they're going out of their way to do more to get folks in group quarters involved in census and to be answering. Everything and offering lots of options, including person-to-person interviews, e-responses so you can answer online, going to places where people are actually receiving services to ask for responses to the census. I would suggest, this is another one of those that I would absolutely suggest for all of you out there, you print out, look at, or pull up on your screen, look at. I'm old school, I print. And have available for the people that you serve or that you work with. This is incredibly important that we get all people counted, all people. And for this purpose, that we get people with disabilities counted. It really does make a difference in what we do. And there's a whole list and explanation in this paper. And actually, now that I say that, it's probably 4 pages because there's a big long list of what the services are that I'm talking about. But there's a long list of the kinds of things that funding is determined by the census. Okay, next slide, please, Andrew. So the next one, there you go. There are a number of things that are kind of new and interesting that have come out. This is one on work-based learning and how to measure work-based learning and student learning from work-based learning experiences. This is a question that's been coming up a lot in the work that I do on inclusive post-secondary education, but I think it's also coming up a lot in the work that you all do if it's not related to that. And that's just, how do you measure it? There are modules on it. There's very specific stuff. And frankly, again, in the policy work that we all do, trying to relate outcomes to policy, you've got to have measurements. So this is a way of measuring work-based learning, and that's a hugely important part of the work that all of us are doing. So I send you to these. I had never heard of the College and Career Readiness and Success Center at AIR, but they have a lot of information, including some initiatives on state-based learning just in general, and some peer-to-peer networks focusing on this as well. So I would absolutely send you there. Next slide, Andrew. So communications, this one was interesting too. I've shared with you a number of times over the past several months information about including people with disabilities more in studies, qualitative, quantitative, et cetera. Making sure that they are included not just in the taking of surveys and things, but on the front end. How do we make sure that we are including them at every part of any research project? This one, and I've shared information about various different cohorts. This one has to do with people with communications disabilities, and I thought this one was really nice. This has to do with folks who use complex communication access, who have complex communication access needs, and they specifically went out to people with this disability and said, what do we need to do to include you more in research that we're doing? And there's some really nice findings here. There's also a bill in Congress, and I meant to pull it up, and I'll go find it, looking at the possibility of a technical assistance center around these issues for people with who use augmented and other communications. And I'll try and find that for you guys, hopefully before we leave, because I meant to pull it up before we got on. But there's a lot of focus on this right now, and it's really important. Next slide, Andrew. So this one is one, Bill, this is another ODEP resource. I try to share ODEP resources as I see them. So this one is a kind of building an inclusive workforce. What it does is pull all kinds of federal resources into one place. And that's why I thought it was nice. It's not that it's for folks on this call that it's going to be a lot of new stuff, but it's all in one place about the federal resources that are available, not just from ODEP, but from other federal agencies. Embracing inclusive strategies, creating the inclusive culture in any kind of a job, recruiting and hiring, retraining and advancing. It's a nice one-stop place, one-stop shop, both for us, but also maybe more importantly for employers that you work with. And it's easy, and it's, it's not glitzy, I don't mean it that way, but it looks nice, it's well put together, it's organized, it's got lots of links. So I thought it was a really nice tool. Next slide, Andrew. This one is Workforce GPS. I generally have shared a number of things with you on that too. You'll remember that Workforce GPS is the website for the American Job Centers. And as they've done a variety of resources, I think they're working hard to try to get more resources up that are available, linked at least, to a variety of different disabilities, because they're trying to help American Job Centers be more welcoming to folks with disabilities. So this time there is an entire page on resources on employment and PTSD. And then there's an entire page on justice-involved reentry and youth, and some particularly nice connections around the intersectionality of populations, because obviously finding jobs as a young person after time in the justice system is tough. This is one where I would say, and I've said this to you before, where you have some more disability-specific information related to this, to youth coming out of the justice system, because we certainly know that a great majority of the youth in the justice system are likely to have a disability of some sort or other, identified or not. This is a nice one. If we have some of that, I would encourage you to share it. And there are ways to do that. And there are some links that I'm giving you as well, because I think there wasn't as much up there as I would have liked to have seen on intersectionality and understanding those two, the intersection of disability and reentry. But the youth reentry stuff was really good. So this is another one that I throw out there for you guys, both to use and hopefully to influence. And I know you can do that. Next slide, Andrew. There are a couple of, this was an interesting one too. This is a NIDE funded, the RTC for Pathways to Positive Futures. I hadn't seen this one before either. Maybe you all are familiar with it. They have a magazine that comes out, I think, quarterly. And this one is on evaluation of innovative transition programs. So there are articles on evaluations by the Healthy Transition grantees over the last 5 years, and other kinds of innovative programs, very specific around transition age youth and young adults with serious mental health conditions. And, some of these approaches we're going to know, but it gave some of the evaluations that the Healthy Transition grantees actually did the evaluations. I think the big study isn't out yet on all of that, but it's, I don't want to say that, it's transition program by transition program for some of the innovative ones. So I thought this was an interesting one too, and it was it was a resource that I wasn't familiar with. So I thought the fact that the entire kind of magazine is around these issues was really interesting. Next slide. There are a couple, I think the next one is, yeah, it is. So there are a couple of things that popped up this month that I just wanted to highlight for you because they relate to somebody who's spoken on the nTIDEs in the past. Lisa Minelli was part of our 3-part series on IPS and the use of IPS with a variety of individuals particularly mental health disabilities. So anyway, Lisa's got 2 articles, or is involved in 2 articles that just came out with the Journal of Disability and Rehab, one on economic evaluation of supported employment program for veterans with spinal cord injury, and that's part of what she spoke with us about on the nTIDE. And then the scoping review of resources for integrating evidence-based supported employment into spinal cord injury rehab. I thought these were nice. I wanted to highlight them for you. Some of this is stuff she talked to us about that's now out in journal form. So there are the links for those. Next one, Andrew. The next, and I know the next one is another one like that. I always like to highlight. So this one is one that Andrew may not know that I was going to share, but Deb Drucker and Andrew were involved in a study that is just coming out in the Journal of Disability and Rehab that I picked up, that the relationship between employment and healthcare among working age adults with and without disabilities in the United States. I thought this one was really interesting because it's, and from a policy viewpoint,
it's brilliant, really, for sure.
It was brilliant. Of course it was brilliant, Andrew. I thought this one was an interesting one. From the policy geek in me said, oh my gosh, this is exactly the stuff we need to be showing about why employment is so important, about some of the barriers to employment based on access to Medicaid, access to employer health care, what that means. I really suggest you go look at it. I thought it was really interesting that certainly people with disabilities are more likely to have delayed or foregone unnecessary care. Foregone unnecessary care. I bet that's supposed to be necessary care. Sorry, my bad. Go read the article. It was really good, and I thought from the policy point of view, which is where I always come at things, I think there's a lot of good information in there that can be leveraged into policy change. Okay, thanks. Next one. Next slide, Andrew. I think that's my, is that my last? Oh, last one. Okay, this one is one from Mathematica. David Mann was involved in this one. I thought this was interesting too, that it's an update on something that they came out with. They proposed back in 2015, basically one door, no wrong door system to award SSDI to workers who are unable to stay in the labor force long term, and focus on how to do that. And then focus on the ability to work rather than the inability. And what's interesting is this is an update that shows that 8 states are developing those workforce retention supports for workers experiencing work loss because of injury or illness. And that then we hope they hope, and I would hope as well, can then be leveraged for a phased-in approach to testing and scale up. So it's another one of those things that talks about no wrong door. How do we kind of knock down the silos so that workers, people who want to work, people with disabilities who want to work, or people who are unable to work, how do we knock down the silos so that people are getting what they need, which is obviously what we all want. How do we make sure people get what they need to work when they can or not when they can't, and make sure that that is accessible to them, as well as it's not as hard and in and out as sometimes it is these days. So I thought this was really nice. And again, that 8 states are trying it. I know I talk a lot about the fact that the states right now tend to be the catalyst for a lot of interesting things that are happening in the policy world. This is another example of that. Okay, I know I rushed through a lot, but I want to make sure we get on to our speaker and the guest. So I want to introduce Lori Norris. She is the director of the National Center for Innovation and System Improvement with FedCap. Over 20 years of experience advocating for people with disabilities in educational and vocational services. She works independently, also works independently in the Rhode Island community, helping nonprofits with strategic planning. And there's lots going on in Rhode Island right now. I didn't realize that you were doing that too, Lori. That's cool. And she also brought an interview with her, so she will introduce a little bit later. So Lori, I am going to toss this to you now. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you. And so let me just open up by sharing my role in employment for people with disabilities as well. In addition to overseeing the National Center for Innovation and Systems Improvement, I also oversee in Easter Seals, Rhode Island, which is a division of FedCap. And the Easter Seals, Rhode Island wasn't always an Easter Seals. And so I'm going to begin this journey with what happened in Rhode Island and how I got involved. So many moons ago, back in 2014, the Department of Justice basically stated that the state of Rhode Island, and in particular their Division of Developmentally Disabled Individuals, that they were charged with unfair labor practices for people with disabilities. And they basically said that there was a high school in Providence that was serving as a feeder to this agency, and particularly so that students upon graduation would automatically go to this agency called TTP, Training Through Placement. And so the Department of Justice said to Rhode Island, you either enter into a consent decree with us that has very specific terms of what has to happen over the next 10 years, or we're going to take you to court. And so the state said, okay, we're going to enter into this consent decree. So then enter FedCap. FedCap was asked to come in and take over the agency TTP and try to straighten it out. Now, TTP at the time, and you can hit the next slide, please, at the time had a sheltered workshop, and it, go back. So there we go. So TTP at the time had a sheltered workshop where people were dropped off, you know, between typical Monday through Friday, 9 to 3 type situation. And they worked on jobs that were very repetitive, you know, such as cleaning like the remote controls for Cox Cable, or, you know, stuffing pimentos into peppers, things like that. Very, very repetitive. And some people were actually making as little as 17 cents an hour at the time of the Department of Justice investigation. So Rhode Island was being watched very, very closely, and is still being watched very closely because, you know, this is a 10-year consent decree. And the pressure to move away from sheltered work and 14C certificates and sub-minimum wages is a battle I'm sure all of you, you know, are aware of across the nation. And so for us, it was not a matter of, yes, we had significant external pressure to shut down the workshop and change our practice model. We had federal monitoring, we had court oversight, we had excruciating state oversight, and all of that was fine, but in the real piece that matters the most is philosophically. Despite what all the pressures are, you in your heart and head have to believe it's the right thing to do. That philosophically you think people should be given, you know, choice to work where they want, earning minimum wage or higher, and driving their quality of life. Now, that's not to, you know, say anything negative about sheltered work, you know, because there could be a place at the table for it. I know that when we shut down our sheltered workshop, we had a lot of people drop out of services because they or their parents wanted them to be between 4 walls Monday through Friday, 9 to 4. But at that time, so we had the sheltered workshop. We would put everybody in vans to go to, you know, activities in the community. Day programming started and ended at the center. And then, you know, we did have a focus on employment. And now our transition was, the way the model works today is no one comes to the center. All services start from home and end from home, just like you and me. Next slide, please. So, you know, you have to think about how you change the culture. And so here's a quote from, you know, Peter Drucker: the greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it's to act with yesterday's logic. Next slide, please. And so you have to think about culture for a second, right? So culture is not created in a snapshot. Culture is developed over time. And so state and community systems have cultures that have grown out of our historical practices. And so what we had to be careful of was honoring the work that had been done in the past. We did not want staff to hear us say, you know, your life's work of the past 30 years, shame on you, because no one did anything wrong. You know, many of the staff that we had at the time really care about the people they serve and the nature of the work. But society and even family members reinforce the idea that people with IDD can't work. And so famous quote from Bush is the soft bigotry of low expectations. And so, you know, our whole model was keeping people safe, and, between the four walls and keeping people together. And so as we started to shift our practices and getting the staff to shift, which was the very hardest thing, changing systems and practices is easy compared to changing culture. And so what we said to staff was, great quote from Maya Angelou, I did then what I knew how to do, now I know better, I do better. That's all. Okay, next slide, please. So think about the biggest lesson when people ask me about lessons learned, and I say to them, do not underestimate what it takes to change practice, staff hearts, and staff minds. And when I first took over, I actually queried the staff and asked them, I said, how many of you think that the people that we support here could go to work? And out of all the frontline staff, which was probably about 30 at the time, probably 25 to 30% thought that it was possible for people to go to work in the community. So you can imagine the shift that we had to go through with staff. We had to get them to really embrace the whole notion about person-centered practice and the dignity of risk, that not treating people just as the participant, but looking at them as the person and helping them make choices and really knowing them. We needed to help them understand moving from groups to then just working closely with a couple of participants and not using vans. Getting staff to use their own automobile. And you can imagine the fallout from that. And then also being able to think on their feet, because, you'll hear from Stacy in a little bit, but you can make the best laid plans. And I could say to someone today, what would you like to do tomorrow? And they say, go to the movies, but then it comes time to go to the movies and they say, no, I don't want to do that. Well, the staff who support them have to know the person well enough to be able to go, okay, let's do this then, or give them some other options. So they really need to think on their feet, to be quick about and really know the person they're supporting. And so we changed our model so that the case manager became a community advocate manager, and the staff that support them are called community advocates. And so that case manager, if you will, has a group that they manage and a group of participants who are assigned to them that they move them about to accommodate, the job coaching schedules and the activities that participants want to do. So we had to obviously put in regular trainings focused on person-centered planning and all the practice changes. And so what we did is we started a pilot. So we kept the old model in place, and we looked at about 7 candidates who we thought would be interested in going to work in the community, would be interested in having services start and end at home, and would have the support of their family members. And so we started that pilot. Now, here's the biggest other piece of information or recommendations I'll share if you change to this model. You have to anticipate for fallout, because some people are just not going to go along with you, despite no matter how much you train them, they're just not going to go on that journey. They don't want to, and that's okay. And so we did everything we could do to bring people along and train people, but at the end of the day, when all was said and done and we changed our model, I had about a 90% staff turnover. So you need to be prepared to manage that churn. Next slide, please. So family engagement, next slide. Family engagement is absolutely beyond critical. And for folks who have, done direct service, I don't need to tell you that, the family members and loved ones of the participant can say all along, yes, 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 we can go find a job. And then when the rubber hits the road and you actually find a job, the fear comes in. Fears, past experiences, and then suddenly they say, absolutely not, I don't want my loved one going to work in the community. So the best piece of advice I can give is to introduce families to the employment process as early as possible. Make them a part of that discovery process where we're spending time with the participant in their home environment, in the natural places that they like to visit and activities they like to do, join family gatherings, invite families into the training sessions on person-centered practices, and make sure they participate in the customized employment. So it's that whole thing of, when you do something with someone instead of to someone, that can be a game changer, because they then become an author and an owner of the plan as well. Next slide, please. So let me talk about practice changes. Next slide. Okay, so as I said, the discovery process. So in the person-centered planning process, everything starts with discovery, and discovery, it's, if you know all about discovery, it's not something that happens fast. It is a long process because you're really getting to spend time with the person, as I said, in their natural environments and learning what they like, they don't like, if they're a morning person, if, they're, cranky, if you make them work too late at night, those sorts of things. And then we go into the customized employment process. So, just to be clear, I talk about the difference between job development and job placement. So it's not placing someone in a job. It's really, customized employment, and I always like to express this, it's not altruistic either. It's not job carving. Customized employment is finding an opportunity that works well for the participant, that interests them and that they can do, but then also is a value add to the employer, that they're getting something out of it. And then, building in the natural supports. Now, I like to talk about this for a second because natural supports are critical in the employment environment and in, just life. And so I always say to our staff, if you think about a job coach, while maybe necessary initially, a long-term job coach keeps someone different. It makes it so they don't become a part of the employment culture. And every workplace has its own culture. But the job coach is that thing that, keeps someone different. And so what we want to do is build natural supports right away, get the job coach out of the equation because, we place folks in work opportunities and we forget, we don't help them or teach them to become a part of the culture. And many, many times people will be placed in jobs and then they're unhappy because they say they're lonely. They haven't been able to integrate into the culture. So then we had to redefine and eliminate the concept of a day. There is no such thing as a day anymore. A day is not Monday through Friday, 9 to 3. So if you think, and it's one of the things I said to the staff, life does not happen for you Monday through Friday from 9 to 3. Life happens whenever it happens. People like to go to different classes at night. People want to join the Knights of Columbus. And so we flipped our model to say there is no such thing as a day anymore. So whenever our participants want services, if that's Saturday night or Sunday morning for church or whatever it is, that's what our job is to do. We support life, every aspect of it. And then fading. So just going back to the job coach, fading as quickly and reasonably as possible so that our participants become a part of the culture in whatever activity they're doing, whether it's work or, something they enjoy. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, so as I said before, the discovery process, it is not finite, it's not fast, it's not rigid. The whole goal is to understand the individual, likes and dislikes, learning more about them every single day, and then also doing some community mapping because we want people to be engaged in their local community. That's our best shot at getting natural supports. Where they become embedded in their community, whether it's work or community activities. So instead of our direct support staff being the one that takes John to the Knights of Columbus meeting on Monday nights, suddenly Bob, who goes to Knights of Columbus all the time and lives down the street, starts to take John. So simple stuff, but really critical in helping get them embedded in fully integrated into whatever they're doing. Next slide, please. Okay, so then the career exploration. So, most of the times you can ask someone what they want to do and they'll say, oh, food service or retail, because it's what they know. So we created an event called Connect to Careers where it's like a speed dating type event. And we prep our participants and they sit with, at least 5 different types of employers to do, mock interviews and informational interviews and things that they've never thought about doing before. And the whole goal is not necessarily to get a job, but to get them exposed to different, aspects of jobs that they could potentially do. And the funny thing about this event is it always, always, always ends up resulting in a job, even though that's not its purpose. Next slide. All right, so let's move on from this because I actually want to talk to Stacy. This is just about, talking about customized employment, and the example I like to use is, a plumbing company who, pays their plumbers, let's say $50 an hour, and everybody has to come in at the end of the day. and load their truck with supplies. Well, you know, if I have a participant who does that every day from 3 to 5 at minimum wage versus having to do 10 trucks and paying that plumber $50 an hour for a half hour worth of work, you can see the very simple math here on this one with the plumbers, that the employer would actually save $32,000 a year by having our participant restock the plumbing trucks as opposed to the plumber doing it. Okay, next slide. So natural supports, they're all over the place. Technology is a beautiful thing, getting out of the way so participants can build their relationships and making sure the job coach does not become a part of that person's culture. Next slide. And again, here's my example, you know, about fading different activities, choir practice, you know, civil engagement groups, Rotary, things like that. The presence of the direct support staff delays the development of relationships, so we don't want to do that. Next slide. Eliminating the day, no more 9 to 3, significant shift in embracing the dignity of risk, which is probably one of the hardest things for family members. Next slide. Okay, so now enough talking from me. I went through that a whole bunch, but there's no one better to hear it from than someone who actually was in that workshop for over 20 years. And today, she does not go to the workshop at all. Her days begin and end from home. And I'm gonna turn it over, and I'm gonna add myself here. This is Stacy DaCosta. Stacy, can you say hello? Hello. Okay, so I'm gonna ask Stacy some questions to kind of help organize and prompt the discussion. So Stacy, can you share with the folks what job you have now, where you work, what you do, and how many hours a week you work?
I work at UNH-IOD in Warwick. I work 3 days a week. I work 8 hours a day, 4 hours a day.
Okay, and so you work 3 days a week, so you work 12 hours.
Yes.
And you don't want any more than 12 hours right now, right?
Not right now.
Okay, why is that?
Because I'm working part-time right now.
Yeah,
So right now I just want to keep my part-time, keep my 12 hours right now
yeah.
until I get,
You have other,
if I get more hours. So
yeah, but you also told me you have other activities you like to do.
yes, I do.
Right, what are some of the other activities outside of work?
I go to like movies, bowling,
Michael's craft classes?
Yes, art and crafts, I go there.
And what did you organize last year? What did you organize for all the people that you wanted to see? Do you remember? The picnic and the barbecue?
Oh yeah, I had I do the picnic last summer. It was fun. It was 2 people there, so it was a lot of fun.
Okay, so then initially you had job coaching when you started at Old Navy.
Yes, I did.
What happened?
And I told them that I don't need a job coach anymore because I pick up quick.
You pick up quick. She
Yes.
said, I got it. I don't need your
Yes.
help anymore. You can go away, right?
I did. I told them I don't need them, so I've been picking up quick, easy. And that was it.
Okay, good. So what's your favorite part of your job?
It's helping people,
You like helping
like
people?
customers.
Okay. So can you tell folks exactly what it is you do when you go in on your shift? What do you do?
I fold clothes,
Mm-hmm.
help customers with things that
Mm-hmm.
if I get stuck, I call like one of the managers, like come help me.
To come help you.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. And then what's that tool that you were just trained on?
mobile device.
And what's that do?
It scans the price, how much it is, stuff like that. So it's like the mobile device.
Yeah.
It's simple and easy.
Okay. And so what's your goal? You want to be trained on what next? You want to be a cashier?
Yes.
Have you told your manager that?
I told Cliff about that and we told about it. I guess he's working on it right now.
He's working on it right now.
Well, he's working on it, so
Okay.
I'm waiting.
Yeah.
So I got patience to wait.
Okay. So are you happy?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you like your life?
Yes.
Okay. What do you do on Wednesdays with Jessica? What's one of your goals?
I go to a library to pick out healthy recipes.
Healthier. And then what do you do?
And I go shopping and then I go home and cook it.
And you go home and cook it. What did you make last week?
The last time I made it was macaroni salad.
And you took it to work to eat?
Yeah.
Yeah. Nice.
It was good.
Nice. So, are you happy in your life?
Yes.
Yes. And one of the things, though, you missed when you changed from the workshop was your friends, right?
Yes.
So how do you make sure you stay in touch with your friends? Because you work in the community now.
When I have a staff, we go to the gym. We meet them there. We hang out after we work out together. We have lunch together. So that's all we're doing. We talk.
You talk, so you make arrangements to pull everybody together.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, can you tell them about the Leadership Academy that you just graduated from?
I took the leadership classes, but it was hard, but I got the hang of it, and we learned a lot of stuff, like how
Advocates in Action showed you how to what?
learn some things that we learn a lot lately. We learned from,
How to advocate for yourself?
yes,
Yeah. How to stand up for yourself?
yes,
And what your rights are?
yep.
And then you graduated it, and who came to your graduation?
My three managers came.
3 minutes, and what did they bring you?
Flowers.
Flowers.
Yeah.
Yep, so they came to your graduation and they brought you flowers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who's your favorite manager? We won't tell them.
I would say like Melissa,
Melissa, why is she your favorite?
because she always helped me a lot
Yeah.
when I get stuck sometimes, or like Kimmy or like Becky, but she comes down to help me all the time.
Okay.
So she's,
So do you want to tell folks how you didn't want to work in downtown Providence in the mall?
it's not for me because it's too dangerous down here.
It's too dangerous. And
Yeah.
so then, but you work in a mall now, right?
Yes.
But where's the mall you work in?
And Warwick.
And you feel safer there?
Yes.
Yeah.
Feel a lot safer there.
Okay, good. So what do you think is going to happen next? Do you think you're going to become a cashier?
I know.
You hope so?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. And do you think you're going to need some coaching to help you?
Yeah, I'll probably have a job coach
Yeah.
with me, so I won't like mistakes.
Yeah,
I can learn, so I'll have a job coach with me,
okay,
and I do that.
okay. And then when you feel you got the hang of it, what are you going to say?
I said I don't need a job coach.
I don't need a job coach anymore, right? You're an independent woman, right? Absolutely. And you have a wonderful, great attitude as well.
That's what everybody can say. I have a good attitude towards the customers. Like, they always come down to check up on me.
Yeah?
Like, when I fold clothes, they said, "You're doing a nice job." I'm like, "Thank you."
Oh,
Like,
go ahead.
like the sizes,
Yeah.
nice and neat. So
Yeah. And what happens at Christmas time at the store?
it's get packed. It's busy.
Do you freak out?
No.
What do you do?
I just like help people because when the holiday comes, like you can't walk through, it's packed there. So I just help the customers put the things out. It's simple and easy.
Yep, simple and easy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. And also, Stacy got her hair done for today and her nails done, and I promised her I'd let her show her nails. You want to put your nails up on the screen and show them how beautiful they are? Nice, huh?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, is there anything else you want anybody to know? What else would you like people to know? Are you happy now?
I'm happy. I have a good life, and I'm a good worker.
Excellent. Wonderful. Okay, I think we're done with Stacy. Does
Okay.
Okay.
I think we'll turn it over. I just put up your contact information, Lori. And,
Yes, thank you.
And so now we're going to turn to Q&A. We have about 12 minutes for Q&A. And again, to do Q&A, you can click on the Q&A box that's on your computer through Zoom. And I'll start it off with a couple questions for you, Stacy, and for you, Lori. It's really interesting, to hear the story about Rhode Island. I think many people are aware of the consent decree, and it's very, very positive to hear how things have been changing. So congratulations. I'm sure
Thank you.
it wasn't an easy transition for sure.
No.
And one of the biggest things that you'll hear, I think, sometimes when you talk about transitioning from sheltered workshop is a sense of loss of community. Like
Yes.
families are concerned because there are friendship patterns. Oh,
Yes.
I was told I have to put my camera on, but no, I don't want to put my camera on. I'm leaning back in my chair. Now you get to see me leaning back in my chair. But you know, but it sounds like it's not just work that you're Stacy, that you're not just working at Old Navy and making friends there, but you're also doing other activities. You mentioned movies and bowling. And are you able to, Stacy, are you able to keep up with some of the people that used to be at your old place of work?
Are you able to keep in touch with your friends that
Yes.
were? Yes.
Yes, I would.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
I just like go, I have staff pick me up at the house. I meet them like at the YMCA or like have lunch with them, and we sit and talk. So that's how I do it.
So it's a bit different than previously. You know, you used to work with them in the wherever the place you were working before, and now you see them at other activities.
Yes.
And you're making new friends at Old Navy.
Yep.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, that you know, that seems to be one of the, you know, when you talk about a big transition like that, your family. How does your family feel about things, Stacy?
What's your sisters think about?
Like,
What did your sister tell me the other day? When we were talking about this? How much you love life now?
yes.
Yes, and how
Yes.
happy you are?
Yes.
Yeah, that you're in the community. And Stacy, as you can tell, Stacy, you know, she sees the bright side of everything, right? She loves everybody, sees the bright side of everything. She's, you know, a go-getter and an organizer. And didn't you have some of the people join you at the Michael's craft classes too?
Yeah, there was like me, one of the clients went, me and Kathy went
Yeah,
with Tamara on Monday nights.
yeah, on Monday nights.
And we do like painting, we do this, we do that, and it was fun.
Yeah. Yep. So Stacy has very supportive sisters who are very involved. And at the time we shut down the workshop, it was actually a trying time in Stacy's personal life as well. So she went through a lot of transition at one time, but in typical fashion, pulled herself right back up and said, I got this, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and was willing to give it a go.
Awesome. Lori, can you talk a little bit about kind of the a little bit more about kind of the transition, and in terms of you know, what happened to the old facility, what, you know, how many people you serve now that were served under that previous one? You mentioned that there was some dropout.
Yeah.
And that and you know, families certainly have the can make choices not to participate in certain activities. Can you talk a little bit about kind of what it was before and what's going on now in terms of numbers of participants and staffing and stuff like that?
Sure. So before, when I arrived on the scene, it was, you know, people, like I said, got just started and ended their day there, and there wasn't much going on. I mean, people could do some of the sheltered work if they wanted to, but as far as like, you know, activities, it was more like, you know, people just sitting around, you know, type of thing. Nothing really meaningful happening, and certainly not person-centered. You know, everybody just, this is where we're going. Everybody went out in groups. And, you know, at that time, if you went to the mall at lunchtime, you'd see all people with disabilities in the mall at lunchtime. You know, it was kind of like that thing. So, so we had at the time about 70 people on our census. And I think one of the mistakes that was made is kind of shutting down the workshop was a prolonged process. And in hindsight, we should have probably just ripped the Band-Aid off, you know, and said, okay, on, you know, March 31st, no more workshop, boom. And so in some ways, I think that should have been done a little bit differently. We prepped, but I also think we did that because we wanted to prep parents and loved ones that this change was coming.
Yeah, that's right.
And give them time. And so, and the sad part is this is where the state is going. And yes, there are still agencies that, you know, are having people between the four walls Monday through Friday, still going out in vans and all of that. And they haven't made that shift, but in time, what we're hearing is that this is where the state is no longer going to fund that anymore. You know, the model that we have is what they're going to fund. Now, to your point, so agencies are not necessarily taking on new referrals because they're trying to navigate how they're going to make changes. So I can share with you of some of the people who stepped out of services, they're sadly sitting at home, right? They're sitting at home, not engaged in anything. And so, you know, I think the most important piece with this model that we're talking about yes, people can be more isolated, and we have to work really, really hard to make sure that doesn't happen. You know, so we really want to honor person-centered, one-on-one supports, 1 to 2 supports, but we have to do it in a way like, you know, Stacy's talking about, to make sure she stays connected with her friends, you know, to be strategic about that, so that those relationships of 20 years stayed in place. Now, the building is empty right now. I mean, I guess one of the positives about it is we need a very small footprint to operate because, you know, services begin and end in the community. And again, you know, who knows what's going to happen? I always say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. For me, it's all about choice. You know, people should have the choice. If they want to be put between 4 walls, they should have that choice to do that. So, you know, my philosophy is always about whatever the person wants. You know, if what they want, that's true person-centered practices, right?
Yeah. And they have to, I mean, the alternatives need to be available, you know, between 4 walls for, you know, 20 years is not necessarily providing alternatives.
Right.
The, you know, one of the questions I had was, you know, there are a lot of folks when they go back to work and earn above minimum wage, they may, you know, they may be pushing into loss of Medicare and loss of Social Security.
Yep.
Is that a prohibitor to the number of hours?
Absolutely. So we thankfully, you know, everybody before, you know, they go into work, we definitely have benefits planning done because, I mean, I'm sure I don't need to tell you, you need to be a lawyer and accountant to really figure that out.
Absolutely.
Almost. So we make sure that the benefits planning process happens. And to be honest with you, we have some of our participants whose families say absolutely no to going to work because they're afraid to lose, you know, the check. So we deal with that as well. It doesn't matter if we do the benefits planning. It doesn't matter. It's just no, you know, there's that fear around that.
Right. No, it certainly does. I have colleagues, 2 PhDs in economics, and you know, Medicaid is a bit harder because it's monthly, not quarterly, and managing the right number of hours. You know, they actually turned down getting a raise. Their daughter, you know, turned down getting a raise because that meant there'd be less hours.
That's right.
So,
yeah, that's right. Yep.
That's an amazing situation, and I think that's one of the next shoes to drop on the systems and systems change. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, we're almost at the end. Stacy, do you have any final comments? We really appreciate you being on, and next time I mess up all the shirts at Old Navy, I'll know they're in good hands.
So I see there's a question on the screen real quick if you want me to address it.
Yeah, actually we have one more question in the Q&A. Let me read it. Lori, when the bus no longer comes, how does transportation to and from work occur?
So that was one of the major changes is staff use their vehicles and they get reimbursed for transportation. Right. That was a major shift. That was, to be honest with you, a lot of why, you know, the fallout happened. People, you know, didn't want to use their vehicles, and so you have to be prepared for that. So, so we don't worry. I mean, and the other piece to the puzzle is, by the way, we are huge advocates of people transporting themselves. So while staff do play a role, you know, folks who can get to place using Uber or public transportation or what have you, you know, that level of independence we push and we want for folks, but then if not, staff use their vehicle.
Right. I was involved in a National Science Foundation grant preparation. We didn't win, but the idea was to be able to use Uber and Lyft and someday an autonomous vehicle, but to have someone with you, have somebody with the passenger, and with the passenger, so that by your cell phone, so that you wouldn't be the passenger wouldn't be alone,
right,
in the vehicle. So anyway, Denise has an answer to that question as well. Denise, you want to take it over? You can always speak up, Denise.
I know. No, actually, I was just going to point out that there was a question, so that was perfect.
Oh,
exactly what I was about to do. So that was all great.
But then I cut off Stacy, though. Did you want to say something?
No, I don't have any questions.
You don't have any questions?
No.
Do you want to leave anybody with any final thoughts? How'd you like being on this today? Good. It was good?
Yeah.
You were nervous?
No.
No, not at all. Say she's a
No.
rock star.
All right. Well, happy 5th of July, everybody. We're going to end the call now. Again, this all will be archived, and you can reach us on the websites that are listed below in the PowerPoint. And thank you again, Lori, and thank you again, Stacy.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.